Can you guys hear me now? Okay, everybody can hear me? I think I just might have been my headphones were bad. Looks like Emily can hear now. Can anybody else? All right, cool. All right, that was a smooth start. So as I was saying, tonight we're going to talk about mostly, the ways that we can look at preventing injury. Tonight's really about just kind of educating, all of you in terms of how to be aware of it. If you saw in the picture of Casey here, preventing injury really starts, pre-pubescent and then definitely into puberty, as there's lots of changes happening in our junior girls' bodies. So I think I wanted to start out in just the most common injuries that I'm sure you guys have seen on the course or just in with your peers. Back pain is the most prevalent injury in golf. That is the same across all demographics, girls, boys, old, young. That is the number one injury we see in golf. Hip pain is also pretty prevalent. I've actually seen it in a couple of our junior girls, just actually who had just genetic dispositions based on how their hip girdles were made and how the hip actually kind of sat into the socket. That actually led to labral issues. So that is something genetics sometimes can play a role. But then also shoulder, wrist, and elbow injuries are most prevalent on the lead side. So if you're a right-handed golfer, that would mean your left side would be the most likely to get hurt. And if you're a left-handed golfer, that would mean your right side's most likely to get hurt. So if you just think of going down through impact, that lead side is going to take most of the vibration, and it's going to basically have to absorb all of that. So all four of these main areas that get injured are not usually acute injuries like you would think of, like in football or basketball, where there's somebody makes a cut and ACL tears, or they get hit and they get knocked out or break a shoulder. Most injuries in golf are repetitive in nature, meaning you just are hitting, let's say in the wintertime, you're practicing off mats a ton. That's when we'll see a lot of wrist and elbow issues. Or just in the summer, you're just playing every single week, traveling all over the place. Then you start to see the back and the hip pain pop up. So a lot of them are just repetitive overuse injuries. So, all right. And then basically, there's a number of factors that predispose anyone to injuries. But in particular with girls, hypermobility is a big one. It is probably the most common issue that I see in young women, and that is if there's any. I'm not sure if we have parents or juniors listening, but if you're interested, if you're hypermobile, the first test would be if like you could take your thumb and like bend it back to touch your wrist. You see, I come nowhere near it. If you're hypermobile, that thumb would actually come back and touch your arm. The other would be putting your arm out, and can you like hyperextend your elbow so that your elbow actually goes up? Obviously, I don't do too well with that. So those would just be two simple ones that you can look at. Can you hyperextend your elbow? Can you bend your thumb back to touch your forearm? Those are two simple ones. I have a number of girls, a couple girls, they can sit on the ground, put their feet behind their head. Those would be some indications that you probably have more mobility than you need. The reason why that can be a predisposition to injury is that if you have all that mobility and you don't have the strength to control it, the shear force and the basically inability to decelerate through those end ranges of motion increase your chances of, if we're talking hips, labral tears, shoulders, you talk about rotator cuff issues. If anybody's ever seen the girl out playing and they hyperextend their back way back in the top of their backswing because they just have so much turn and that they feel like they need to keep going and they almost have trouble stopping. They kind of look like Gumby, for those of you who are old enough to remember Gumby. But the hypermobility, in older golfers, we wish we had more mobility. In the younger golfers, particularly in women, you are more prone to hypermobility, and a lot of that comes from the as you get into puberty and you start going through your menstrual cycle, the increase in estrogen that you have, which obviously is for childbirth to help with flexibility of the tissues. It actually can predispose you to a higher risk of injury during sport and training. So I don't know how many of the parents listening are talking to your daughters about this, but this is a huge issue that really needs to be discussed. I think we're actually going to try to do another webinar. We'll actually have Alex, one of our strength coaches, we'll have her come on and talk more specifically about the impacts of this and related to sport and training and likelihood of injury. But in particular, if you think of the different cycles of the menstrual cycle, the pre-ovulative or pre-ovulation phase, which is kind of after you start your phase, where you have your flow, then basically kind of 6 days into about day 14 when you actually ovulate. There's lots of research out there there's a higher incidence of ACL tears in soccer players and basketball players. So there is a increased risk of injury based on where you are in your menstrual cycle. With my professional players, LPGA, Symetra Tour, we talk a lot about where they are in their cycle, and we actually will talk about tournament planning, just because sometimes they may not feel at their best, and if they need to take a week off, we'll look at actually taking a week off based on where they are in their cycle. So it's not something that a lot of people are talking about. Sometimes it can be a little uncomfortable, but it is incredibly important when it comes to peak performance, but more importantly, preventing injury and educating our young women about how to handle this part of being a woman and training to play at a high level. So it's not something that we really want to ignore. For parents out there who want to get more educated on this, we're happy to talk about it with you and ways to approach it. Like I said, I think we're going to try to have Alex actually talk about it. She's actually in the process right now of writing a blog article about it, so be on the lookout for that as well. Social pressure. I see this a lot with my younger juniors. They want to carry their bags, particularly a couple of junior girls who've got scoliosis, and we definitely don't need additional pressure on that spine. But it's not cool to push a golf cart. They want to carry their bag. That's a great example of a way to increase your risk of back pain, decrease the amount of energy that you have to play, and make it harder to play a game that's already hard enough, just because of the social pressure. There's other pressures. If somebody is hypermobile, one of the best ways to prevent injury is actually to build muscle, to help to control that range of motion, to absorb the pressures that those joints are going to be taking from the sport. But a lot of girls are afraid they're going to bulk up. There's a stigma that if you lift weights, you're going to get really bulky. The amount of lifting that somebody would have to do to actually get bulky is incredible in terms of the amount of repetitions that they would have to do. 2-a-days, hours and hours in the gym. The amount of food that they'd have to eat would be incredible. So the chances of this happening for a junior girl are very, very slim, particularly when you start talking about just time commitment that would take. You bring in school, you bring in homework, you bring in tournament play, everything else that goes with it, lessons, practice. The amount of time that they would have to take away from all that to actually get bulky would be quite large. The chances of that are pretty low. Nutrition, I fight with a number of my juniors on this about eating on the golf course, and staying hydrated. If you get dehydrated, your nervous system fires slower. The chances of poor sequencing, which can lead to injuries, increases. If your blood sugar is getting low, you're going to, it's just your performance is going to decrease. You're going to have to compensate a bit more in your golf swing. So in a very real way, could lead to an increased chance of injury. But sometimes I've heard a number of junior girls talk to me, well, the other girls aren't eating, so why am I going to eat? So it really educating our juniors on that topic as well. Bad training is one that drives me crazy. I see it on Instagram sometimes. Friends of the girls that we work with, just doing things that are just really bad, and honestly, just how to put this nicely, not intelligent. So really, don't go to YouTube and just watch Golf Channel and think that we should implement these training programs with our juniors. Golf Digest or Golf Week has their fitness sections. Don't just pick out somebody's workouts that they're doing on tour and try to implement them with our juniors. They really need to be designed and appropriate for what the juniors actually need. We need to take into consideration where they are in their development, what their training age is in terms of how much experience they have, and look at it in terms of a long-term plan, not just a short, we need to gain 10 yards because the college coach at the college camp said that I need to hit it further. So let's just go into we haven't worked out at all, but we need to start lifting and get strong and powerful to hit the ball further. So please don't just jump into a stock program that you find somewhere. Overuse and the last one, recruiting, go hand in hand. And this is really the last four here are not just unique to young junior girls, definitely junior boys too in these. The fact of the matter is, as I'm sure Brandy has educated all of you on, you need to play to get recruited. You need to play well, but unfortunately that leads to this feeling that parents need to just schedule and the kids need to play 6, 7, 8 weeks in a row plus travel. That takes a huge toll on a developing child's body, and that just further increases the chance of breakdown and injury. So I would very much encourage you all to talk with Brandy about scheduling your tournaments coming up. Talk to her and about learning what are the tournaments that we really need to play versus what are the tournaments that would be nice to play. So the best practice to avoid these injuries, number one, I think I already mentioned it, education. I'll say it again, education. Educate yourselves as parents, educate yourselves as juniors, educate each other in terms of best practices, and go off of the actual science. There actually is more and more science coming out that is not just Golf Channel science. In the weightlifting world, we have bro science. In golf, I call it Golf Channel science. Where it's the latest and greatest thing that pops up on Morning Drive or something along those lines, and that becomes the gold standard. A lot of the products that are being pushed right now for speed training, for other performance pieces, have had studies with maybe 6 people in them, and none of them have been juniors. So it isn't prudent to take a lot of the training that we see on TV and just apply it to juniors. And that comes down to, we need to assess where our child is at. You can see a girl in this picture here, Blythe. This was before she hit puberty. So training her with heavy weights would be very unintelligent. She was super hypermobile, and we really needed to help her to learn how to control her body and control her movements. Reassessments, so constantly reassessing where you are and moving from there. And that requires that you work with people who know what they're doing. That could be TPI certified. Please understand that Titleist Performance Institute is a weekend course that you pay $1,000 for, and then you answer 25 multiple choice questions. So just because somebody is TPI certified does not mean that they're an expert. TPI has done a lot of great things. Unfortunately, they just went and certified everybody in the industry. So really vet out who you're working with, who your child's working with. There's a lot of great practitioners and trainers and coaches out there, but please look beyond just what their certification is, and actually ask them the tough questions of what are their assessments, where do they see your child in terms of development, and where do they see them going long term. Measure, don't guess. That goes along with those assessments and reassessments, and schedule planning, like I mentioned with Brandy. Look at your schedule. We can talk with your swing coaches. If you're working with a physical therapist or a personal trainer, somebody who's helping you with your golf fitness, all those people should be looped into when are you playing, where are you traveling, so that you can develop plans to perform your best. I got a question up here. I'm currently spraining my trapezius muscles, not quite sure how. Any advice to help me with this? So the first question, whenever we sprain any muscle, I'm assuming, if you can see me here, I'm pinching up in here, kind of the muscles in your upper shoulders, kind of leading up to your neck. Normally when we sprain something, so that's actually going to technically is like a micro tear. So the thing you do not want to do is put ice on it. Most people will go ahead and put ice and take anti-inflammatories. When we have a partial tear or a sprain, those two terms are synonymous. Basically, the ideal thing you want to do is actually encourage the inflammatory process. There's been a number of studies that if you just throw ice on it, it actually will make it feel better in the first 72 hours. But if you look long-term, 6, 10, 12 weeks out, the tissue is actually more fibrotic, and you're going to have more problems later down the road. So you will actually want to assist the inflammatory process. Icing just delays it, and it kind of numbs it, which is why it feels better the first 72 hours. But it actually predisposes you to developing more scar tissue. So what you really want to do is you'd want to actually have soft tissue work, so massage. There's You could do. There's a number of videos actually, which I think it's Gitto. So if you have, we can chat afterwards. I can send you videos from our YouTube page in terms of how to roll that area out. But the number one thing, if you sprain any muscle in your body, doesn't matter if it's your trap or anything, you do want to avoid icing it if you can. If you really want to put ice on it, at the very least, please do hot-cold contrast. So at least you're trying to flush some of the bad tissue out and try to help to get the good cells that need to help that heal to the area. And then you want to actually address the tissue, some soft tissue massage. There's lots of different techniques. Try needling, active release technique, depending on how bad the sprain is, to try to get that tissue healthy again. And then you want to retrain. It says you're not sure how you did it. We'd want to assess if we're talking the trapeze. Is it poor shoulder motion? Are you hypermobile and you're using your upper trap to shrug and move your shoulder? Coming down through the golf swing. There's lots of different potential ways that could address. But if anybody listening, if you do sprain a muscle, don't just go throw ice on it. You've actually damaged the tissue. You need to make the tissue healthy again. Just icing it, taking Advil, and taking a week off, you are fulfilling the prophecy of the number one predictor of future injury is prior injury. If you don't get that tissue healthy. So please get the tissue healthy, treat the tissue, go see whether it's a massage therapist, a medical, a physical therapist, somebody who can actually work on that tissue for you, get that tissue healthy again, figure out why you sprained it, and ask them to help you do that, so that you can actually get at the root cause of what the problem was. Many times an injury is just the symptom. There's an underlying problem that causes that. And if we only address the symptom, the likelihood of you getting hurt again is very high. So hopefully that answers your question. If not, fire away with follow-ups in there. All right, so our next one. All right, so to assess your risks, my goal whenever I talk with people is to try to give you guys takeaways. The first is going to be the hypermobility test. So you can do the thumb to your forearm. You can, can you pop your elbow? Can you hyperextend that? Can you hyperextend your knees? Those are all indicators. Can you put your feet behind your head? Then after if you're hypermobile or not, then obviously the next step is going to be a golf fitness assessment. Of course, the golf fitness guy is going to tell you that. And the reason behind that is we want to assess not only how mobile are you, but how can you move in the right directions. I actually have had a couple of girls who are actually really hypermobile in all those tests that I talked about for hypermobility. But when we actually went to look at their trunk rotation, so if you're watching it right now, you can kind of see me rotating. You should be able to turn about 60 degrees, and they would only get about 45 degrees. And it actually wasn't because they were tight. It was just because their brain neurologically wasn't able to stabilize to allow them to use the full range of motion that they should have. So if you are limited in one of the big four rotary segments, which are your neck rotation, your shoulder rotation. So if you can see in the video now, that's shoulder rotation. Shoulder turn, as we call it in the golf swing, is actually your thoracic spine rotating. And then the fourth area is going to be your hip rotation. So if you have any limitation in those four areas, particularly the hip rotation, that's the number one predictor of low back pain. You're going to have to introduce swaying and sliding side to side, standing up out of posture, all the swing faults that your swing coaches try to help you with. If you have physical limitations, you're going to be banging your head against the wall because you're going to struggle to do what you're being asked to do on a performance standpoint, just because your body can't do it. Assess your schedule. How many weeks are you playing out of a year? My pros will not play more than 4 weeks in a row if they can help it, and Brandy can speak to this too. It just mentally, it's just an absolute grind. The travel's crazy. I get some juniors that are going out playing 6, 7, 8 weeks in a row. They're playing a more grueling schedule than the pros, and then they wonder why they don't perform well later in the week or later in that stretch. So weeks 6, 7, and 8. So look at your schedule. Be realistic with it. You do have school. You have lots of other requirements. You do want to be a kid a little bit too. Have fun and enjoy it. This is not your job. So at least hopefully not yet. So do assess your schedule. If you are playing too much, you are at a higher risk for injury. Soft tissue maintenance, we talked about that a little bit when we talked about the great question about the sprain and the trap. Make sure you keep your tissue healthy. We're going to talk about some tips that you guys can take away with you tonight about soft tissue rolling. We've got lots of videos and resources for you that I'm going to share with you at the end too. They're all free. I want you guys to hopefully use them as much as possible. But the best maintenance thing or things you can always have, and they should always be with you on the road and at every tournament: a foam roll, a softball, and a lacrosse ball. Those three things. If you can't fit the foam roll, I know you have room for a softball and a lacrosse ball, even in just your golf bag. But those are going to be your tools that are basically your on the road massage therapist, to help you try to address the tissue areas that, every time you play and you walk, you're going to get muscles that get trigger points. You're going to get restrictions. We want to make sure we keep those as loose as possible. In the presence of trigger points, your muscles can't produce as strong of a contraction as a healthy tissue could. They become less elastic. The chance of injury gets higher. So those are very preventable. They're normally occurring, but we can get rid of them and actually see performance enhancements as well too. And then obviously with your swing coach, look at it from a technical side of things. Are you doing things in your golf swing that are putting your body in positions that are not ideal? Are you putting a lot of stress on your low back by hyperextending? Are you, if you're a left-handed golfer, are you crazy right side bending with really open hips and putting increased shear and torsional force on your spine? Those are things that you want to look at as well. So are there things technically that you can do? That's where oftentimes we'll work with the swing coaches to say, biomechanically, this is what girl A can do. Technically, what are you trying to get her to do? And then a lot of time, it's pretty amazing how much symmetry there is between the two, technical and biomechanical side of things. And a lot of times when you fix the biomechanical things, the technical issues become a lot easier to address. So good for that. And again, if you guys have any questions specific to yourselves, just like the trapezius question, please fire away. I'm here at your disposal. So I wanted to do a little case study, though this always kind of brings it home as we're getting, then we'll open it up for Q&A pretty soon here. But Brittany is a professional player. I think she just missed the cut this week, so I think she's number 90 or so on the money list right now on the LPGA Tour. She won last year on the Semester Tour. Great player from Canada. I started working with her probably 3 years ago. When she came to me, she was an absolute mess. She was your classic girl who played lots and lots of junior golf and didn't really get a lot of good guidance. She played at NC State, and even there did not get a whole lot of great advice and guidance in the strength and conditioning in the staying healthy world. She had elbow issues, wrist issues, hip issues, terrible back pain, ankle issues, which affected squatting and everything else. And all of her injuries came from compensations that she made because of poor ankle mobility. She was a high-level competitive ice skater when she was younger, had lots of ankle issues and injuries, and she had such bad ankle motion that she was having to make up for that up the chain at her hips and her back, and then it kind of worked its way out into her arms. So we had to kind of break it all the way down and kind of rebuild her a little bit. And and at that point she was kind of a fringe Semester Tour player. She's played her way onto the tour this year. I think she's only missed 3 cuts after starting with just partial status. So she's had a great year. Her body stayed healthy. And I think the biggest thing that I see when we talk about a high-level player like that, or even my high-level juniors who are playing at high-level Division I schools, the ones that are going to make it to the next level not only are taking care of their bodies, but they're also looking at pre-round and post-round routines, morning and evening routines. They know exactly how long their warm-up routine at the course is. They know from there, then they know, how long of a drive is it to the course? How long do they take to shower, to lay out their clothes, to eat breakfast? They have their meals planned. They don't surrender to the mercy of the buffet, the continental buffet in the hotel or what the golf course, if it's a hot dog or something. They bring their food, they pre-plan it, they control every element that they can control possibly. Because the game of golf, there's so much uncontrollable, as you all know, that just makes no sense not to control everything that you possibly can. And there's tons of scientific research about morning routines, evening routines, dealing with stress and anxiety, performing at a very high level. Most people probably have a pre-round routine when you warm up, but how many of you have a true post-round routine evaluating your stats? Maybe it's going to the range, nutrition, food, recovery, those sorts of things. So I think we take a case of Brittany, who's a very talented player, and we look at where she's gotten to, a lot of that has come because of her ability to start to frame routines and taking care of her body and getting the right information and doing all the things that we talked about before, from an assessment, a true plan, and then moving forward that way. So the top self fixes. So softball, lacrosse ball, and a foam roller. In case you don't know what those look like, those are two foam rollers. The one with the bumps on it is a little bit more aggressive. The softball, or that's a softball there. Obviously, lacrosse ball's a little bit smaller, a little white ball, a little harder. Good for getting into the tough to get places. So if you didn't know what they look like, there they are. I'd recommend a high density foam roller. Usually you can go on Amazon, just type in high density foam roll. You can get one for probably under 20 bucks. Don't go to Dick's or Target or any of the brick and mortar stores. You're going to pay 30 to 40 bucks probably for it. You can get it way cheaper off Amazon. Just be careful. There are two types of foam rollers. Generally speaking, there are a low density foam roller, which you will run through pretty quickly. You do want to make sure that you do get the high density ones. Those last a bit longer. And you can see both of those are, those are both the 12-inch. The flatter one is 18 inches. The kind of spiky, bumpy one is 12 inches. They even make some that are hollow, so you can throw socks and stuff in there if you're putting them in a suitcase. So they do travel pretty well. All right, so we'll kind of get to the Q&A. I want you guys, if you have questions, please ask. You can either, again, you can raise your hand or you can type in the question box. I alluded to the YouTube videos that we'd have. We actually just opened up basically a member area for all of our videos. I think we've got over 250 in there at this point. And I can actually, let me show you that quick. Turn my screen share on. All right. So basically, if you go to our website and you clicked on premium content, this would be your your home page. You just would access the premium content, and then from within here, it's loading. You will be able to, you can either search, there's a do-it-yourself if you have some pain. Basically, we have tons of videos in there, articles in terms of how to fix your pain. If you just want stuff on golf fitness, there's a whole playlist just on that. You can search just by keyword if you have a specific thing you want to look at. And then we also have by tag. So if I wanted to look at a short educational video here, I can click on that. And these are 2, 3 to 5 minute videos. Hip pain in golf, 3 exercises, or body swing connections, 2 reasons people have back pain. So those are all ways that you can basically hopefully help yourself in terms of really addressing any issues that you do have. It's free with that code. Let me pull that slideshow back up here. Where'd it go? Here, I'll put it. It's PKB. PKB free. Let me double check that, but I believe it's PKB free with an exclamation point. But at this point, I'll just confirm that that's the code. My slideshow disappeared. So, but if you guys have any questions, please type them in, specific to you, specific to your daughters, any questions you've heard, if you want to do like a myth buster, something you've heard on Golf Channel or somewhere, let me know. So I'll give you guys a couple of minutes to type in those questions, and then we'll go from there. Let me, while you guys are doing that, I'm going to pull up our code here. Good thing I checked it. So it's PKB free 1. I'm just putting that in the chat box for you guys. So if you go to the website, you just click the premium content button. Just type in PKB free 1, and that gives you free 30 days to check it out. So endurance training. Thank you for asking this question, Eric. It depends what you're talking. In most cases, no. So I get this a lot. I'm dealing with this with all my kids that have gone back to college right now. I actually have a number of golfers who get hurt because of all the running that they do. So golf is a power sport. So there's different energy systems in our body, and golf, basically, if you think of a golf swing, it's less than less than 2 seconds total. The actual acceleration phase, you go from 0 to, LPGA Tour average is 98 miles an hour. So you're going from 0 to 98 in under a second. That is a faster acceleration profile than a Formula One car. So it's the fastest acceleration profile in sports. And so that is a power move. So that energy system is fatigued in under 10 seconds. So if you think of golf, you swing, and then you got about 3 to 5 minutes. In my case, probably 5 minutes, because I need to try to find my ball in the woods. But before you hit your next shot. So when we talk about endurance training, so think about cross country, and a lot of parents will say, "Oh, my daughter to run cross country because that'll help her golf game, that'll help her, so she has a good endurance and she doesn't get tired on 16, 17, and 18." If your kids are out practicing and they're walking when they're practicing, they're going to walk 5 to 6 miles in a round. And if they're like most of the juniors that we work with, they're out there pretty often. They don't need to go run on top of that. Our muscles have 3 types of fibers. Some are fast twitch, some are slow twitch, and then there's this group in the middle that can be trained either way. And if you're doing lots of running, like slow endurance type running, you actually can convert those fibers to more slow twitch, which is the opposite of what you need for golf. You need the faster twitch basis. If you're going to do, we will do, that's not to say we don't ever do what I would call aerobic, kind of trying to build an aerobic base training, but we will use interval basis, generally speaking. So you'll go kind of as hard as you can, sprint repeats, where we're in more of what's the anaerobic realm, where you go as hard as you can for 10 to 30 seconds, and then you kind of walk back down the hill, and then you go back up the hill. So endurance training at certain times is good, and we'll actually use it, because the better aerobic basis you have, the better you're going to be at recovering from injury. But in terms of, we get a lot of college coaches where they have their teams go and run 2 days a week, and that's just silly. I get girls with shin splints and hip pain and back pain from the running, not from the actual playing of the sport. And when you're doing long, slow distance, you're training the athlete to go slower. And in golf, we want to be developing the ability to create power. So I hope that answers the question, Eric. We actually wrote an article. If you look at our blog, I think it's the number one thing college coaches are doing to hurt their players. And a lot of golf coaches are actually telling the strength and conditioning coaches that they want their players to be running and do hills and do stairs and those sorts of things to build up their endurance. In actuality, the girls are walking 5 to 6 miles a day repeatedly. They're getting plenty of sport specific long, slow training in terms of walking, pushing or carrying their bags. What you want to be taking their time in the gym to be doing is developing the ability to create force or strength, and you want them to be able to create that fast. So the amount of force somebody can produce, or how strong somebody is, and then how fast they can move it, those two things added together equal power. When golf is a power sport, when everyone's concerned about how far does my daughter hit it, that's how much power is she creating. Club head speed is golf's form of power. So if you want to create club head speed, or even with a lot of our pros and the higher level juniors we look at, they may generate plenty of speed, but we want them to be more powerful so they can create that same speed while only exerting maybe 75% effort, because that means they're less likely to get hurt. They're going to last longer. They're not going to be tired at the end of the round. And if they have to play 4 weeks in a row, 5 weeks in a row, they're going to do much better. So if that doesn't answer the question, Eric, just please shoot me follow-ups. And that's a great question, though. That's a conversation that we really need to be having a lot in golf, because there's a huge misconception there that when we're actually hurting our players. The number one problem in golf is overuse injuries, and then we're having them do an overuse activity, and we wonder why they continue getting hurt. So another question from Gittle: how often, what would be a rough idea of a week's worth of workout should be, and how should I train to prevent these issues with my trapezius, pain in the middle back and the elbows, golf elbows? So I would say depending on age, generally, and depending on time of year. So at this point, you're coming out of the heavy competitive season. You're of the summer. You're moving into your high school season. Generally, we're recommending kind of 2 workouts a week, and that would be maybe 45 minutes worth, where it's like where it would be strength training. So and that depending on where you are in your fitness age. If you're really, really experienced, we may be in your, in high school and puberty has happened and you're in the strength training window where we have an opportunity to really build a lot of strength and get a lot of return on our time for that. Or probably have progressed to using barbells to some degree. If you're early on and you have never really trained before, you're going to use more cables, dumbbells, kettlebells, a lot of single leg, single arm type things, which you'll still use in the older years. But barbells are a tool that allow us to get more load on somebody to get more return to develop a bigger ability to generate strength. So I'd say generally 2 times a week in season, 45 minutes, maybe even 30 minutes if you're really, really busy. But then on an everyday basis, you should be doing some form of mobility or core work, even just 10 to 15 minutes as a break from homework. The best players at the top of the recruiting boards and the best players in the world are doing something every day. That doesn't mean you need to be in the gym getting sweaty, lifting lots of weight. It could just be you're doing mobility at home, or you're doing some core work at home. You're doing soft tissue, so you're rolling out on the balls while you watch TV. It doesn't need to be things that take up a lot of time. They can actually, a lot of them, be integrated into what you're already doing in your daily life. But in season, you should be looking to get a strength training workout generally 2 times a week. And then once you get to the off season, then it kind of, depending on how serious you are. If you're in high school, we usually would say minimum, 2 to 3, ideally 4. So we can really make some big gains in that off season to build up your reserves that we know are going to get depleted in the heavy in season. If you're, middle school age, 2 times a week is plenty. 3 times if you really are not doing anything else. And younger than that, you want to be playing other sports. You want to be playing basketball, softball, lacrosse. I mean, other sports that are getting you moving and developing speed, agility, those sorts of things. In order to specifically prevent issues with the trap or the pain in the middle back, it could be a number of things. You'd want to look at your overall thoracic mobility, your ability to extend and rotate. If that's limited, then the muscles could have to work harder, and that could cause some of those issues. If you're sounds like you're describing kind of what we call upper quarter issues, so kind of belly button up. So the thoracic spine and the shoulder blades are kind of your stability centers, or I should say your shoulder blades are your stability centers, where your arms come in for your shoulders. Your shoulders are mobility joints. And if there's issues in the thoracic spine and that the thoracic spine doesn't move well, and then the shoulder blade doesn't connect well to the rib cage, that can lead to some instability down through the arm and cause more of the elbows. But in terms of if you've had those prior injuries and you don't currently, number one, you'd want to make sure the tissue's healthy. So you'd want to be rolling and making sure that that tissue is ready to accept a good strength training program and respond to it healthy. You can't build $1 million house on quicksand, which is my way of saying if we gave you the greatest strength training program, but your tissue's injured and not healthy, you're not going to get much out of that. You're probably just going to get hurt again. So you really need to make sure that tissue is healthy and ready to accept whatever is going to be given to it. Now, assuming that that's taken care of, then you would look at, for preventing elbow, you'd be looking at good shoulder stability, good thoracic mobility, and then also forearm strength. We talk about kind of pronation, supination, rolling up, if you think about the golf swing, how your wrists roll over one way to the other as you come through the golf ball. And then you'd also be looking at, grip strength and those sorts of things. So, and honestly, your core, it's kind of all connected. So then you'd also look at how strong is your core, because if your core is not strong, and then you have great shoulders and great forearms, all of that's just sitting on something that's waiting to break too. And so you can actually just be overcompensating with the upper body. And that can cause injury. So I guess that's my way of saying to give you the best, more specific answer would be to talk, actually get it assessed. And then you'd be able to understand, are the injuries that you're having most likely from a mobility problem? Are they because you have great mobility and you just don't control it really well? Depending on what the answers to those are, the treatment or the workout protocols kind of would go somewhat different ways. But the tenets that would remain the same would be making sure you have good mobility in all your rotary centers, your hips, your T-spine, your shoulders, and your neck. And then looking at, if you have good mobility through there, how well do you control specifically for what you're describing, traps and forearms? The shoulders would be the #1 area we would look at in terms of how well they are controlled. So Brooke has a question: is swimming a good second sport? How does it relate to golf with helping or hindering? So swimming, I think, depends on the age of the junior. So a younger junior, I would say swim away. That being said, if they're in the pool 6 hours a day, they are going to tend to get very kind of protracted, where, from the side you can see my shoulders are kind of more this way. That will lead to a forward shoulder posture, typically a forward head. That can lead to some issues if from an overuse. Swimming has its own overuse set of issues, just as golf does. I think swimming as a supplement, just to keep somebody active, to work on core strength, coordination, it's great for opposite arm, opposite legs moving together and kicking, disassociation, those sorts of things. My concern, actually, we have a very high level player who it does swim a lot competitively in the summer, and we see every summer she gets more and more and more this way, and you want to be the opposite way for golf. So I think as long as you're implementing correctives to combat, as long as you understand what swimming is going to do to the body in terms of the repetitive motions, and obviously that just depends on the stroke that they're swimming. If they're swimming backstroke, we're not going to have too many worries about them being too far forward. But if they're doing, a lot of breaststroke, butterfly, front crawl or freestyle, they are going to tend to get a little bit more shoulders up and over. So swimmers do have a good history of shoulder issues. So I think, again, it's the same thing talking about, with the traps and the elbow. Shoulder health is going to be hugely important to be monitoring and be assessing and making sure that we have an exercise program for that junior to make sure that that's not going in the wrong direction. And that swimming is actually helping. I think if we're looking at just kind of increasing activity and giving them something to do, I think if they enjoy it, then yes, let them swim. But our high level junior right now, she's just going into high school, and so we're having that conversation with her now of how much do you love swimming? Do you want to go golf? Do you want to go swimming? Do you want to continue it? She's probably a year or so away, where if she's going to get really, really serious with golf, the chances of injury with swimming are probably going to outweigh the benefits. But younger, I would swim away. But I think we just want to keep an eye on the junior's body to make sure that the swimming overuse issues are not coming into play, because those can definitely create an issue or an impedance to good golf, but also present potential injury risks in the golf swing too if the posture issues aren't addressed. So hopefully that answers that question. If that doesn't, Brooke, shoot me a follow up there. But yeah, so I think we're coming on. We got probably time for 1 or 2 more questions if anybody has them. And in the meantime, if you guys do have any issue, if you lose that code, I think it was PKB1. I think it was. I scroll down. Yeah, PKB free 1. If you do lose that code, just let me know. You can always shoot me a note. My email is just chris@parforsuccess.com, or you can go through the member area and shoot me a message through there. Please use us. ask us lots of questions. Information is always free. We're here to help. I want you guys to get the best information, particularly in the world of YouTube. There's a lot of bad information out there. So, all right, so we got 2 more questions here, and then we'll wrap up after this. Would something like Pilates be a good and light daily workout? Depends on the type of Pilates. Some Pilates, I don't know how into Pilates you are. Some Pilates is not light. So it would depend on what you're doing. Pilates can smoke you. So Pilates is great in terms of philosophy. For those of you who don't know, it does work a lot on a good diaphragmatic control, good breathing, core stability, those sorts of things. It would build a good foundational level of strength. It would certainly not be specific to golf, but as an additive or something kind of in between, but it's certainly better than nothing. There are certain cases where I would be somewhat cautious of some positions, but in terms of it taking you through full ranges of motion and making you control and own that, it's fantastic. It would just, again, who are you doing it with, make sure the person you're with knows what they're doing, and can give you, make sure that, like, the little nuances of, is your back arched or is it in a good neutral position? Are you using your diaphragm to control it? And I think there are lots of great benefits to Pilates if you're doing it correctly, which I think is true for any exercise modality, whether it's yoga, Pilates, weightlifting. There's no one great solution. You'll certainly hear people, oh, I only do Pilates, or I only do yoga, or I'll never do, I'll never lift with a barbell, or I'll never lift, I only go dumbbells. I think we need to be careful in the strength and conditioning performance and keeping people healthy world with the total extremes of one or the other. Every single exercise modality has value, and when it's used correctly. So, in terms of the light daily workout, I think that would just really depend on the level of Pilates that you're doing, the experience that you have with it. Because obviously, if you're really experienced and you're in great shape, one workout won't be too bad. It'll be harder for others. So that's kind of Pilates. There's nothing wrong with Pilates. I think it's great in certain situations. I would just, it would depend on making sure technique is done correctly and that it's leveled correctly. All right, final question here. Daughter plays varsity basketball after the high school golf season. Is basketball detrimental to golf? No. I played basketball. That was my sport growing up. And if you think about the conditioning, it's more of an anaerobic based sport. From a training standpoint, there's a big need for creating vertical thrust, vertical force, which is one of the big three predictors for club head speed in golf. I think if you're playing basketball, I think the eye-hand coordination is phenomenal. There's a lot of lateral movement side to side. It's not just one plane of motion. Obviously, from an injury standpoint, the risks are not as much repetitive use because there is so much left and right, and obviously there's jumping and those sorts of things that can be somewhat repetitive. But yeah, obviously you have more of your issues with ACL injuries and those sorts of things. But again, I think the training I've had a number of players who play basketball and play golf, particularly early, freshman, sophomore year, high school, and before. It's a great complement to the game of basketball because it really helps. You have to be a great athlete. It teaches you how to be an athlete, how to be explosive. It does a lot of great things just from a general athletic basis, which if you're looking at the best players in the world right now, they are athletes first at the bottom foundation, and then they're built as golfers on top of that. So I think basketball is phenomenal, particularly when kids are younger, just, as with soccer and other sports that force you to change directions, have eye-hand coordination, spatial awareness, all of those sorts of things. As they get older, that's where it comes into tournaments and those sorts of things. I think the one thing to caution with basketball is the type of conditioning that you're having the athlete do. If you're doing lots and lots and lots of long distance running, which would not be specific. I wouldn't do that for basketball anyway, but I know there are some people out there who feel like they need to go run 5 miles a day in order to play basketball. It should be a lot of the sprints, change of direction, those sorts of things, which are actually helpful for basketball. If you're going to do conditioning, helpful for golf. And if you're going to do conditioning, I'd actually recommend you doing sprints. You're doing change of direction drills, those sorts of things. So hopefully that answers that question. If you guys have any others, please utilize the member area at Perform PKB. Shoot me and my team lots and lots of questions. If you haven't checked out the blog, check out our blog. It's lots of good information up there. And obviously check out the newsletters. Those are going out as well. You can check either at our website, Power of Success. You can check at the PKB, Perform PKB area, where we have all of those articles there as well too. You all, as part of your member benefits, you do get free 30 days training online with us. Please take advantage of that. Not enough people have. It's a great way to kind of get exposed to training. You get to talk with us, with our coaches. We can talk about your case specifically, get you what you really need. And then also you have from attending tonight, you've got the free 30 days of basically access to all of our videos. So please take advantage of us. Use all the free stuff. We're giving it to you so that you can get the right information. If you do have any questions at any time, please give us a call. We do free 15-minute phone consults too. My mission in starting this and my mission in being a part and teaming up with PKB is to give you guys the right information at the right times. So just please use us, ask. And if you have any other questions, I look forward to hearing from you guys. And be on the lookout. We'll be doing another one of these coming up soon. So hopefully you guys got something out of it, and we will see you guys shortly. So have a great night, everybody.